Imagine the following scene. It is a Sunday morning in the aisle of a Trader Joe's. A person pushes the shopping cart wearing fluorescent running shoes with advanced cushioning, high-tech compression pants, and a dry-fit shirt designed to evaporate the sweat of a marathoner crossing the Mojave Desert. The level of aerodynamics is such that, if this person sneezes, they run the risk of breaking an Olympic record. But there is no ultramarathon on the horizon. The biggest physical challenge of that moment is seriously evaluating whether it is worth taking the family-size bag of Doritos. This is an extremely common sight. From coast to coast in the United States, high-performance clothing has become the official uniform for those who have not the slightest intention of sweating. It is the modern armor to brave the Starbucks drive-through line, calmly walk the dog through the suburbs, or simply exist in the comfort of home. The most fascinating thing is not the inherent comfort of these clothes, but the fact that the human mind begins to treat this synthetic fabric with an almost inexplicable reverence. People dress like elite athletes to perform the most extreme task of their routine, carrying all the grocery bags from the car trunk to the kitchen in a single trip so they do not have to go back. But what exactly happens in the mind of someone who puts on that famous logo in the morning, knowing perfectly well that the only exercise of the day will be breathing? To answer this, it is necessary to analyze what psychologists classify as a fascinating cognitive illusion. There is a fascinating concept in psychology called enclothed cognition. In simple terms, researchers discovered that the clothes a person wears not only change how the world sees them, but physically alter the way that person's own brain operates. If someone wears a white lab coat, the mind automatically adopts a more focused, careful, and analytical posture. Now, guess what happens when the brain realizes that the body has just been wrapped in compression fabrics, socks with impact absorption technology, and a hoodie with that iconic boomerang shape? Immediately, the brain fires a small and comforting shot of dopamine. The mind sends a clear message of self-affirmation. Discipline is high today. Look at all this technology in the form of fabric. We are ready to dominate any physical challenge. The only detail is that this intense feeling of athletic productivity usually happens while the individual is still sitting on the couch, browsing the Netflix catalog, or eating a bagel loaded with cream cheese. Upon putting on gym clothes, the person's brain essentially receives the emotional reward of having gone to train, without a single calorie having been burned in the process. It is a kind of perfectly legalized neurological cheat. The average citizen wakes up, puts on that $150 sports outfit, and instantly, a false sense of accomplishment sets in. When the moment arrives when they theoretically should get in the car and drive to the nearest Planet Fitness, the brain whispers, in an incredibly seductive way, "Why all this real effort? We are already dressed the aerodynamics of an Olympic champion. The hardest part is already done." The very act of getting dressed ends up stealing the motivation for the exercise. Sports clothing has stopped being the preparation for the event and has become the event itself. Thus, the individual feels victorious and productive, consuming their iced caramel coffee with the posture of an athlete in post-workout recovery. It is the illusion of productivity sold in the form of quick-drying polyester, where intention becomes worth the same as action. But, to be completely fair to human behavior, this mental cheat is not sustained solely by the release of dopamine or the fantasy of being a secret marathoner. There is a brutally honest physical factor that explains why modern society decided to adopt these high-performance clothes to do absolutely anything other than sports. The naked and raw truth, stripped of any complex neuroscientific analysis, is that humanity simply realized that jeans are, in their essence, denim prisons. For decades, society accepted the discomfort of tight belts, buttons that mark the stomach, and rigid fabrics in the name of public decency. But then, a silent and extremely comfortable revolution happened. The rise of casual sportswear was possibly the greatest and most successful trick modern civilization ever invented to allow adults to walk in pajamas on the streets without suffering the severe judgment of their neighbors. If we draw the line of human evolution, we will see our ancestors in rustic skins, passing through suffocating Victorian clothes, arriving at heavy 20th century office suits, until reaching the absolute apex of our species. An individual wearing oversized sweatpants in a morning Zoom call, hoping intensely that no one asks them to stand up. No one wants to admit they crossed the city to buy a gigantic pack of paper towels, wearing exactly the same clothes they rolled in bed with. That is where the engineering of these pieces shines. They deliver the comforting feeling of being under the covers on a rainy Sunday, but with a design intentional enough to not look sloppy. The famous logo printed on the chest, footwear, as a shield against the scrutiny of others, transforming what would be read as pure laziness into an active and modern lifestyle choice. Comfort unanimously won the historical battle against formal etiquette. However, if it were purely for the elasticity of the fabric, any $5 pants bought in a discount store would serve perfectly. Which brings us to the true and deepest reason why someone decides to spend hundreds of dollars on branded sportswear just to perform mundane tasks. If the issue were strictly about the comfort of cotton or the flexibility of spandex, any generic $10 pants bought quickly in the Walmart clearance aisle would masterfully fulfill the role. However, there is a gigantic abyss between wearing comfortable clothes and investing hundreds of dollars in a pair of sneakers with space propulsion technology and a windbreaker jacket signed by an elite athlete. It is at this exact point that the psychology of consumption reveals one of its most fascinating dynamics: the eternal battle between the real self and the ideal self. In structural psychology, the real self is who the person actually is in the present moment. Someone who, most likely, prefers to spend Friday night lying on the couch, and whose closest relationship with athleticism is desperately running with the trash can to the sidewalk on collection morning. On the other hand, the ideal self is the perfectly optimized version of this same individual. It is the person who wakes up at 5 in the morning without ever using the snooze button, consumes an extremely bitter green juice without making a face, and completes a 5-kilometer run through the neighborhood before the sun even rises. When someone enters a sports store or clicks buy on the internet, they are not acquiring rubber, compression mesh, or polyester. This person is, in fact, buying a tangible piece of that fantasy of greatness. The genius of major sports brands lies in the fact that they do not sell gym clothes. They sell human potential encapsulated in an iconic logo. The financial transaction works as a magic shortcut for the mind. Upon putting on that rigorously designed piece, the painful and frustrating distance between the sedentary real self and the extremely disciplined ideal self seems to disappear instantly. The clothing works as a formidable identity shield, projecting an impenetrable aura of health and vitality to the rest of the world. This phenomenon relies heavily on what is known as the halo effect, a cognitive flaw where a single visible characteristic causes society to automatically assume a series of other positive qualities about the individual. Whoever crosses paths with this person choosing avocados in the organic aisle of Whole Foods concludes, without thinking twice, that here is a focused, vigorous citizen in absolute control of their life. The individual gains all the social credit, respect, and admiration associated with an active and disciplined lifestyle, without ever having needed to step on a treadmill or lift a single dumbbell. It is the acquisition of athletic virtue through purchasing power, a brilliant outsourcing of discipline. However, this high-tech fabric armor does not only serve to signal health and physical vigor to the neighborhood. It curiously evolved to become one of the most subtle and powerful indicators of modern status. When analyzing society under a purely anthropological lens, one notices that symbols of human status have undergone a drastic transformation over the centuries. In the distant past, an individual's power, hierarchy, and influence were communicated visually through tribal war paint, skins of dangerous predators, or elaborate solid gold crowns. More recently, in the ruthless corporate environment of the 20th century, the pinnacle of success was undeniably the custom-tailored three-piece suit, always accompanied by an ostentatious Swiss watch shining on the wrist. But times have changed radically, and the semiotics of wealth accompanied this evolution. Today, the undeniable modern equivalent of that Wall Street armor is, quite curiously, an iconic wing-shaped logo discreetly embroidered on a casual garment that often costs the equivalent of a car loan installment. Wearing high-fashion workout clothes right in the middle of a working Tuesday afternoon sends an incredibly powerful subliminal social signal. Everyone who crosses your path. The non-verbal message silently transmitted through the streets is not "I just ran a challenging half marathon," but rather "I have absolute and unquestionable control over my own schedule." The individual is, in fact, communicating to the world that they are not bound by the dress codes of an oppressive cubicle with fluorescent lighting. They do not need to wear tight dress shoes or suffocating ties to prove their worth to a traditional corporate hierarchy. More importantly, it signals that they possess abundant financial resources and enough free time to entirely prioritize their own comfort and well-being. It is the supreme luxury of modern flexibility packaged in breathable spandex. Visualize the classic scene that repeats daily in a sophisticated artisanal cafe in Silicon Valley or a bistro in Brooklyn. There is the citizen, comfortably settled in a leather armchair, sipping an $8 oat milk matcha latte while calmly typing on their laptop. They wear aerodynamic running pants and propulsion technology sneakers, developed specifically to break Olympic records. The undeniable truth is that they will not sweat a single drop that day. Their ultralight sneakers will only step on the polished wooden floor of their home or the fluffy rugs of co-working spaces. They are flaunting that sports equipment precisely to prove they have reached a level of success where the formality of a suit has become obsolete. The brilliant irony of all this is that the apparel originally created with the sole purpose of maximizing physical performance and extreme movement ended up becoming the official dress of those who conquered the privilege of remaining comfortably static. However, this appropriation of sports for absolute comfort reveals an even deeper paradox about human behavior, especially when dissecting the essence of the most imperative and famous motivational slogan on the planet. The climax of this philosophical analysis of contemporary clothing rests exactly on the monumental irony that formed around three simple and powerful words. Imagine, for a moment, the historical burden carried by the most famous imperative of the modern world. Just do it. Just do it. Embrace the relentless action. Break the sweat pouring down your exhausted face. Endure the impact on your joints, the dust, and the absolute suffering of reaching the peak of physical capacity, pushing known limits of endurance. This was the visceral call, the direct and aggressive summons to leave the comfort zone in any circumstance and at any moment. And suddenly, the slogan, aggressively designed to combat human inertia, ended up surprisingly, ironically, and unquestionably comfortably transforming into the official uniform of padded sofa enthusiasts. The most impressive thing is that these high-impact gym clothes now sponsor the most domestic, tranquil, and absolutely motionless mission possible, such as obsessively pressing the next episode button on the Netflix remote control on a rainy Sunday afternoon. This is where the heart and the most fascinating psychological mechanism of collective human behavior come in. The person on the couch, in fact, never needed to run the exhausting distances of an ultramarathon in the Mojave Desert to experience the exact feeling of crossing a finish line. Human beings, since primordial times when the tribe represented the only guarantee of survival in a hostile environment, possess a deeply rooted and instinctive need to connect to a movement much larger, more epic, and vital than themselves. They desperately desire the emotional association with heroic and cultural archetypes, the unstoppable athlete who does not give up, the monumentary victory in sports, the blind discipline, the records smashed on world athletic tracks. When the common citizen wears the compression pants and puts on the running shoes that Olympic champions use on their victorious feet, they instantly absorb all the aura, cultural heritage, and immeasurable respect of that entire global and engaged community of sports and glorious sacrifice. And magically, they do all this while remaining in the deepest tranquility, inertia, and protection of their own home or padded apartment. And it absolutely does not matter that this colossal collective participation felt intensely in the soul and physical comfort of that motionless body happens solely as a seated spectator, watching some brutal sport on television or passively consuming more casual videos, while dipping their French fries in ranch dressing. Therefore, facing this monumental appropriation of sweat and sporting glory through highly valued synthetic threads and resoundingly successful logos, the most important and sensible reflection of the whole journey is not a moral or athletic judgment about who really has the legal and sporting to wear dry fit pieces or sneakers designed for breaking records. The main discovery, in fact, completely frees that domestic athlete from false obligations. The liberating realization at the end of this whole analytical journey is very simple and comforting. There is absolutely nothing wrong with being the best equipped couch athlete in the neighborhood. The human mind is an incredibly complex machine that is always looking to optimize two essential things for its survival and happiness: immediate physical comfort and a deep sense of belonging and identity. If wearing those $100 compression pants and putting on glow-in-the-dark sneakers is the most efficient and welcoming strategy the brain has found to deliver this double dose of well-being on any given Wednesday, the goal has been fully achieved. The individual beat the system, found their symbolic tribe, and even ensured that midnight trips to the fridge were made with aerodynamics and extreme comfort. The important thing is to silently recognize the genius of this cognitive trick and embrace the character. Lying comfortably on the couch with perfect lumbar support and breathable clothing, ready for the true endurance challenge of modern life. The next marathon, not the 42-kilometer one on the hot city asphalt, but rather the continuous and immersive marathon of watching absolutely everything the internet has to offer. If this deep exploration into the peculiar habits of human behavior in its search for the ideal self and the brilliant dopamine maneuvers in everyday life help to understand why that Trader Joe's cart is pushed with such athletic style and speed, your own cognitive training was an absolute success. To continue this intense mental regimen and delve deeper into the fascinating gears that drive the most unusual human attitudes, without needing to sweat a single drop and in the maximum comfort of your favorite high-performance gear, leave your subscription to the channel. Get ready, hydrate, and keep watching, because the next video is the perfect mental warm-up. See you then.